So we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion tonight, but this is probably going to be, hopefully, very different from anything that you've ever seen. And so that's sort of my goal. So to begin with, I'm a little bit of a nutty professor. Some would say kind of a mad scientist. I like to think outside the box, thus my brain in this picture is outside the box. I would also like to forewarn you, see the disclaimer, that you might hear some things that, well, you won't hear anything that offends you, but there'll be nobody here in the room who will say, hey, I told him to say that. I try to do things very differently, and that's what we'll see tonight. So don't blame anybody. If I say something you don't agree with, it's me. What my goal is today are threefold. First thing, I want to get you to think differently. I'm of the opinion that most Americans simply think the way someone else wants us to think. We read the things the way people want us to think, and we then recite those things as if those things are accurate, without doing any self-reflection or any investigation. I want you to think. I'm not going to tell you what to think, how to think. I just want you to think. The second thing I'd like for you to do is hopefully have a little fun. Like I say, I'm a little bit of a clown. You'll find it out in the 5-hour energy. As soon as it kicks in, you'll know for sure. And the third thing I want us to recognize is that this world, this universe, can only move forward if we're willing to do the work, put the world on our shoulders and move forward. I'm afraid right now that most of us are sitting idly by, watching someone else decide which direction the world moves. And I don't want us to do that. So shameless promotion, let me get this over with because I have a family to feed. As she mentions, I've published a couple books, so you can buy those wherever books are sold. And you can follow me. I'd really love if you'd follow our blog. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, and Instagram. Just a brief note about the book, because it's sort of important. It's why I'm here. I was going to say my wife is here, so she's correcting me. We have a son named Naeem, who is 21. When Naeem was born, we wrote Harvard for an application. We wanted to prepare him for the future. We believed in backward design. Part of that process was to write him letters. So from the age of 2 to 16, I wrote him letters, and we kept them. When he was 16, unbeknownst to us, because he had completed high school curriculum, had earned 33 college credits, was fluent in 4 languages, was admitted to 24 of America's top 27 schools, on and on and on. He said, I don't want to go to college now. I want to chase my dream of playing professional soccer in Brazil. So our 16-year-old son packed his bags, moved to Brazil, and thus I gave him the letters that I'd written him over the years because I figured we were 7,000 miles away. I cannot afford the phone calls. And you're not going to want to talk to your dad because you know more than your dad, so I'm going to give you these letters and put them in a binder. And like any smart man, when in Brazil, you visit Rio. So I dropped my son out of the academy and said, hey, good luck, love you. I'm going to Rio without your mom. Little did I know, 3 days later, my wife calls me. She says, hey, he's not doing well. He's not going to make it. There's some cultural differences that he had. He was an American. So we talk about diversity. He's an American playing soccer in Brazil, a place that produces over 900 professional soccer players every year, and soccer players who are not too happy about this African-American taking their position in Brazil. So he has some other challenges, like you can't flush toilet paper. He didn't know that. Yeah. The bathroom was stopped up. It was a mess. So after she says, you're going to have to go back to the academy and take care of him. I said, really? I get a cab, $415 later. I arrive at the academy. I'm expecting to see this kid to be disheveled, having a hard time. He comes to the gate, looking with a big smile on his face. I said, hey, man, are you all right? He said, yeah, Dad, I'm good. I just got one question. I said, well, I got one question, too. How come I spent $415 and you got a smile on your face? He said, Dad, I reread the first 3 chapters, the first 3 letters. Did you put this book in any particular order? I said, no, why? He said, because I remember my purpose. And whenever I come home, we need to publish these letters, because when you tell me I can do something, not only do I believe that I can do it, I know it's supposed to happen. So then we published the book, Raising Superman. So I've been the first father since 1737 to publish a lifespan of letters to their son. The first guy was Lord Chesterfield. I am not a lord, but you can call me that and bow. The second book is Stop the Bus. We wrote to to critique America's educational system. We think there are some things that we need to be doing differently, and so we have letters, short essays, 200-word essays here and there. So that's it for the shameless promotion. So let's start here. Diversity and inclusion. I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of talking about diversity and inclusion. I know you're like, really? Like, that's what we're here to talk about today. Yeah, I'm sick and tired because most of us are lost and confused when it comes to diversity and inclusion. See, we've been talking about diversity and inclusion forever. I'm 51 years old, and we didn't call it diversity and inclusion. We called it something else, but it was the same thing. And whenever we don't fix it, what America does great. We're wonderful at we point fingers at somebody else. It's your fault, sir. And it's your fault, ma'am. And we don't resolve anything. And in the spirit of a good American, I'm going to play the game a little bit, too, tonight. I'm going to put the blame on somebody. I'm going to blame parents. I'm going to blame adults. Like you, and you, and you, and me, people in this room. I'm going to start with my own, right, because that's the way you start. So that's my parents, Tommy and Gladys Turner. I'm going to talk to my mom about that picture. I tried to find one that was, kind of year appropriate. This is the late 60s, early 70s, but she might have been hanging out in San Francisco with the hippies or something back then, right? Shh, don't tell her I said that. But why am I going to talk about parents first, blame them first? Because parents, when we talk, adults, when we talk, especially to children, it sounds like blah, 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 blah. And there's a problem with that. Because what we're doing is we're communicating what the future should be like to people who have to be responsible for the future, and they have no idea what it is that we're saying. So we can't just blame my parents. Like I said, we have to blame all parents. And my concern is that plenty of parents today, or adults today, have not recognized that, and we're bound to do the same things we did in 1967. And speaking of 1967, and parents who don't understand anything, in 1967, Charles Schulz released Charlie Brown's You're in Love, Charlie Brown. It appeared on CBS. And for the first time in the history of Charlie Brown, there was a teacher in the episode. And they were trying to decide what to do with the teacher. Do we give the teacher a voice? What should the teacher sound like? And anyone know what the teacher sounded like? Wah, 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 wah. And you know why they chose that? They chose this trombonist to play the sound because they figured that that was how children understood adults. Then when we speak to them about any topic, diversity and inclusion included, we sound like wah, 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 wah. It sounds like that, right? What did you just say? So what adults sounded like in 1967 is pretty much what adults sound in 2017, which is why I'm going to show you tonight that the issues that we face around diversity and inclusion are the same issues we've always been facing. And that the people who we should be blaming and looking at, and the people who should be counting on to change that, are the people sitting in this room. 1967 or 2017, I don't know, is it deja vu? Because it feels like 1967 all over again. Insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Let's take a look. 1967, what were we doing? We're fighting an unpopular war. What are we doing today? 1967, we were working with Russia. Need I say more? I'm not going to say any more because you all are recording me. I need to stay out of trouble. I don't need WikiLeaks. 1967, America was dealing with issues of air pollution. I'm from Gary, so an industrial community, lots of factories. At the time, we were talking about air pollution. Is it harmful? Well, we know today that it is. Now today, we're talking about global warming. Does it even exist? Is the Earth getting warmer now? We're now debating some of the same issues, but perhaps this issue is more perilous than the issue in 1967. Again, there we are, banging our heads against the same environmental issues. I try to think of the nicest word I could use, which was bigot. But in 1967, Lester Maddox ran on a segregationist campaign and became governor of Georgia. And I won't ask you your opinion about the recent elections. I'll just let history decide that. But I will say a little caveat about bigots, which is to say I'm one as well. And what I've tried to do, what my wife and I have tried to do, is raise a child who is as diverse as possible so that he has the least chance of being a bigot. See, I believe there are primarily three people that exist on this in the U.S. There are BIDs, BIRs, and BITs. BIDs are bigots in denial. BIRs are bigots in recovery. And BITs are bigots in training. We don't need to have any more bigots in training. And we certainly don't need any bigots in denial. We need to all recover from that. And this is part of what our problem is when we talk about diversity and inclusion. In 1967 and going back, there were domestic upheaval, right? We had riots and protests, and what do we have today? Some of the very same issues. People were arguing in 1967 over who should be married. Loving versus Virginia. Anyone see that movie? I saw it too, and to be honest, like, it could have been 30 minutes instead of 2 hours. My God, it was so long. Like, the court didn't want you to get married. You got married. You moved to DC. You came back. Like 2 hours for that. 2017, most recently, the Texas court has decided that they might want to try to find a way to reverse the legalization of same-sex marriage. Men still want to control women. 1967, Governor Reagan signed the Therapeutic Abortion Act. 2017, we're talking about defunding Planned Parenthood. So again, like I said, it's 1967 all over again, and in the words of Charlie Brown, say it with me, ah! You all sound the same. How do we get here? How do we get out the 60s to only be in the 60s? Anybody have an answer? I do. I call Charlie Brown. Charlie said there's no denying it. We sound just like our parents. They know, they've been listening to parents for over 60 years, and we sound pretty much the same. So after channeling my inner child a little longer, I called my boys Mr. Sherman and Peabody. Are you all familiar with them? So I called Mr. Peabody. Well, Sherman answered the phone because he's typically nosy, and he picks up the phone, and I said, Sherman, I don't want to talk to you. You don't know anything. Can I talk to Mr. Peabody? Of course, Mr. Peabody comes to the phone because he's a valid dog. I had that joke all prepared. Yeah, he's a valedictorian from Harvard University. He's also one of the most intelligent beings on the planet. He's a martial artist, gold medalist a couple times, speaks a number of languages, a chef, you name it, Mr. Peabody can do it. So I figured Mr. Peabody was the perfect person to help me, in part because he's not human. I didn't have to worry about him messing it up. I didn't have to worry about him throwing his own personal preferences in it. I just could count on him to give me a good answer. So Mr. Peabody, I said, hey, listen, we have all these issues now, man. We have racism, we have sexism, we have classism, we have wage discrimination, we have lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer issues. We have all these issues. And he said, yeah, Nate, that's all familiar to me. I'll help you figure it out. I said, so what do we do? He said, come on, we get in the Wayback Machine. We're going back to 1967, we're going to fix it all. We're going to go back when you were 1. We're going to help you understand how to communicate with adults, how to get adults to communicate with you, and we fix it, then we won't have a problem moving forward. Of course, Sherman hops in my seat, so you can't see me riding here. And we take our trip back to 1967. But before we could go, we decided to take along this little invention called the wah-wah machine. And the wah-wah machine is phenomenal because when you speak to children hear wah, 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 wah. But with the wah-wah machine, we could translate what you were saying into a language that the child would understand. It's really cool. Just one small problem. We found that every time we translated it, children said, hypocrite. Did you hear me? Every time we translated the words you spoke, children said, hypocrite. Because the way that you were living was not anywhere like the words that you were speaking. So there was a loss to translation. Again, kids don't understand you, you don't understand kids, but those kids are going to be responsible for moving this world forward. We have so many issues that we're leaving on the shoulders of millennials who we put down all the time, but we raised them. We have the Generation Z, kids born in 1994 to, I think, 2010. who are going to have to deal with some of the most traumatic issues this world has ever seen, and they're going to be the least prepared because we're not doing the best job we could do. So our discussion, we found that there were 9 words when we put it through this Wawa machine that we had problems translating. So I'm going to share with you these 9 words. First, I'm going to have some water because 5-hour energy is making me dry. The first word is diversity. So here's what we say. We say we're all different and those differences should be embraced and welcomed. Yet what children see are that we acknowledge the differences so that we may continuously find ways to deny others humanity. I heard someone recently give a diversity talk, a diversity professional, someone that people pay lots of money to speak. And she said, and I quote, "You can have all white men in the same room and have diversity because all of them are different." And she's absolutely right. One guy's blonde, one guy's 6 foot, one guy's 5'10", one guy's got red hair. That's true. They're all diverse. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about everyone having humanity. And so we talk to kids, then we're surprised when we look in a place like Silicon Valley, and we can't figure out why there are only 2% of the scientists and engineers are African American, or only 3% of the science and engineers are Hispanic and Latino, or why only 18% of the scientists and engineers are women. Well, because we've been saying to kids that diversity can be anything. And if diversity can be anything, then why talk about diversity? The second word was inclusion. Here's what we say. We embrace those outside our group to work and go to school with us, but we accept change begrudgingly and remain as segregated as possible. Neighborhoods, religious institutions, schools, work, and of course, tech companies. I'm real fond of tech companies. My son is studying to be an engineer, our son. He's majoring in electrical engineering, computer science, and computer engineering. And so it's really important to me that he gets a job. So this is an important discussion. But when we talk about inclusion, I ask, how can we have inclusion when we're all still living in seclusion? See, if I ask you, where do you live? If I ask you, who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? My sneaky suspicion is that those 5 people will look just like you. There's a science behind this. There's a gentleman who has a formula called the Dunbar's number. Anyone ever heard of Dunbar's number? Dunbar's number, it tells you historically that people have a friendship of about 150 people. You thought it was Facebook with your 5,000. No, that's not true. If you had to put together an invitation list for a wedding, there would be about 150 people that you could think of off the top of your head to invite. In that 150 people, 5 people would be the people you spent 40% of your time with. 10 other people would be the people you spent 20% of your time with. The other 135 people would be people who got 40% of the remaining time, so not very much. Here's what I'd like to ask you right now. Who are the 5 most influential people in your life? And do those people look like the 1967 America or the 2017 America? How about your neighborhoods? How about on Sunday when you go to church? Which in 1967 was the most segregated hour in America, and in 2017 is still the most segregated hour in America? How about your children's schools? Do they look like America? See, we want diversity and inclusion, but we forgot that diversity and inclusion starts first at home, not at work. We have to know each other and appreciate each other now, not later. So this is another challenge I'd ask of you. I'd ask you to start something that doesn't exist, but this is a great idea. A domestic exchange program. Yeah, like foreign exchange. Yeah, we love that. We love to have the little kids come over. We had one, young man from Barcelona. We could not wait for him to go home, by the way. I'm just saying. We love to have people come over. Our children are learning the language. It's enriching for us. Even our children go overseas and they learn the language and learn another culture, but we don't even know our next door neighbors. So how about we start with that? How about for the rest of the month? Well, how about for February? It's a short month anyway. How about for February, you decide that each day you're going to have lunch with 5 people outside of your usual 5. How about you decide you're going to go to a movie theater outside of your general community? Or you're going to go see a play or some performance outside of your usual sphere of people? If you want to change the conversation in America, you want us to be better, you want us to stop talking about diversity and inclusion, it begins with not being secluded. Respect. We say adhere to the words of Dr. Seuss, a person's a person no matter how small, but really in America, we respect is what others should have for you and your stuff. So we're the generation of Gordon Gekko, where greed is good. So we think respect is what we have in America. With Oxfam reported recently that 8 men control more than half the world's wealth. 3.5 billion people are worth less than 8 men. We respect that. We'll put those men on TV. We'll let those men talk and tell us everything that they want us to hear and know, and yet somebody else who could be certainly much more learned, we won't listen to them. What do you think we're telling children? Empathy. We say walk in someone else's shoes, feel their pain, but what we kids see is that put the shoes on and take them off as quickly as possible, or as soon as the warm and fuzzy feeling subsides. Just Dr. Bloom from Yale University says that empathy is bad, and I agree with him completely. Because what happens with empathy is that we become altruistic about that we did something for someone. We get this really happy feeling. You all know it's true. You may not want to admit it now. You get a happy feeling when you write a check to something, or you go spend an hour mentoring someone. You feel great about it. But the reality is we forget that we leave. I'm guilty of that. I live in Zionsville. I grew up in Gary. I tell people all the time I should be embarrassed, and I am embarrassed, that I no longer live in a community like the community I grew up in. And young people who could use to see me around and have me around to talk to, don't have me around to talk to. So I could drive in and do some mentoring and drive out supposedly feeling good, but I don't. I feel worse. Because I should be moving the world forward, and I'm not really doing that. So that's what I'd ask you to do. Don't feel the warm, fuzzy feeling about a 1-hour donation or mentoring for an hour. Let's really roll up our sleeves and really get involved in changing lives. The 5th word is appreciation. So we say thank and reward others for their contribution, yet we deny their contributions if possible, and when denial is impossible, we compensate below fair market value. Now, many in my community, African-American community, still think we should be compensated for slavery. We were promised 40 acres and a mule. Never gonna happen. But that's a denial. By the same token, women are paid 79 cents for every dollar a man makes. African Americans are paid 73 cents for every dollar a white male makes. Hispanic and Latinos are paid 68 cents. We say we appreciate people, but we don't pay them their due. Our children see that too. Productive. They say diversity is good for business. I hear that all the time. Diversity corporations, diversity consultants love to tell you that. And then what children see is the delay and deny of the mobility of others in an effort to maintain the status quo. So I'll give you a great example. Facebook. Everybody's heard of them because everybody has a Facebook account. Did you know Facebook, like all the other Silicon Valley corporations, hire 2% black, 3% Latino, 18% women? But you all have an account. We all have one. Yet we say we are in favor, we support diversity and inclusion, but we all own an account of a company who does not value diversity and inclusion. If I ask you to hold up your phone, my guess is the majority of you all will have an iPhone. And Apple's the same way. In fact, Apple went so far as to deny people their fair wages by colluding. You all heard about that. But you own an Apple phone. You own an iPad. So the question is, how can you say you believe in a diverse and inclusive society when you give your money and time to institutions that don't? What's productive about diversity and inclusion is that it's an $8 billion industry. And as I said, since 1967 to 2017, we're essentially the same place. So how productive is it? It's great for the wallet, not so good for Americans. Patience. We say patience is a virtue. The change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. What we see is that employment of every tactic possible to get people who are beneath you to accept their unfortunate lot in life. Patience. Patience is time. Time is a luxury of those who have. Time is a prison of those who do not have. Ask a woman who earns 79 cents, should she be patient to get her full dollar? Ask a child who's counting on their parents' other 21 cents, can they be patient when they can't pay their tuition? patience. Equity. We say all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then we see the necessities for governmental agencies and enactment of laws in order to make that happen. We say we believe these things, yet we need affirmative action, we need diversity and inclusion, we need equity officers, we need Civil Rights Act, we need Title IX, do I need to go on? We need Equal Pay Act, etc. And my favorite one, unconscious bias. We say there are biases that we are unaware of which cause uncontrollable behavior. And what you're going to see is you behaving like someone who suffers from Tourette syndrome. Now let me tell you, I have someone in my family who has a brain abnormality. And at times that brain abnormality causes her to have a seizure-like effect. And so I know what's an unconscious behavior versus an unconscious behavior. But we treat bad behavior. We treat racism and sexism and whatever ism we could add to the list as if it is something unconscious. It's not. It's not Tourette's. It's not a seizure. It's your culture, your community, and your decision making. When I was a kid, well, let me say this. When I was a kid, unconscious bias was waking up unconscious because I said something that was biased towards one of my parents. I can't advocate for that today. But we act like unconscious bias is like this get out of jail free card. Like you can say whatever you want to say, oh, my bad. Or like Urkel, oops, did I do that? Right, I can't do his voice, but you get it. It's not. You know, certainly after the first time, that it was wrong. But we continue to do it. It's like speeding. It's like looking at your phone and texting while you drive. We all know we have an option, but we choose to do that which is bad for society. So here's what happened. We're almost done. We had our 9 words. We thought we were prepared. We're going to share it with all adults. Back to the present. You see we have an extra rider now. That's Penny. You familiar with Penny? Penny decided to ride with us because Penny said, listen, you men will mess it up on your own, and I'm not going to let that happen. If we're going to rewrite history, we need a woman to go back to. So Penny joined us. And besides, Penny said she can't trust men with directions. So she wanted to make we got back to 2017. And when we landed back, went to see the Peanuts, they told me, hey, you did a great job, Nate. You see Charlie Brown in the air. Actually, they had me up in the air too. They were celebrating me, said I did a great job. And then we had a conversation, and I told them what we did. I said, hey, we went back, we got the Wayback Machine, and we got the Wawa Machine, and we understand what adults are saying now. We're going to be able to translate it, and kids are going to be able to understand what parents are saying, and we're going to be able to change some of the issues that we've had over the last 50 years. And then you see Lucy in her chair, she leaned back and she said, Nate, we always understood what adults were saying. We just stopped paying attention to them because they didn't mean any of it. She said, they're mostly hypocrites. They tell us one thing, they do something else. They tell us make friends, they only have the same friends that look like them. They tell us everything is possible, but they're fine with living in a community where only certain income levels can reside in a particular zip code. She said, we already knew. They're not going to change. She said, but can you tell them 4 things before you close? I said, sure. The first one, she says, tell them humanity is stuck in the evolutionary quicksand. That we're stuck for the last 50 years. We've been in the same place. I know you like to believe we've been moving forward because we have driverless trucks and computers, et cetera. But as human beings, our souls, our spirits, we're stuck. She said, the next thing to tell you is tell them that our nation has all the signs of congestive heart failure, which is true. You know, congestive heart failure is hereditary. And so we've been passing along our issues of diversity and inclusion for the last 50 plus years. But she said, here, we can fix it. She says, this little known thing called backward design. We can decide what kind of society we want. Right now, collectively. We can decide that. And then we can design a process to make that a reality. But here's what we have to do. We have to pick people who are really capable of leading us, and we have to know exactly where we want to go. And finally, she said, tell them about your son one more time. So there he is. And she says, tell them that the children are watching. They're not listening, they're watching. Thank you for listening.